Introduction. Civilizations rise when capability outpaces complexity. They fall when complexity outpaces capability. Everything else, culture, politics, economics, technology, demography, morality, is downstream of that structural balance. This book presents that balance as the central mechanism of civilization. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. Systems remain functional only when the people running them possess the minimum level of competence required by the system's design. When capability falls beneath that threshold, the system decays. When it falls far below, the system collapses. The difference today is scale. Never have so few competent operators been asked to maintain systems this complex. This is a simple truth, but profound in its consequences. Once understood, it transforms how you interpret the world. You begin to see why institutions produce increasingly poor outcomes despite higher budgets. You begin to understand why frustration grows across all layers of society. You see why maintenance declines, why errors propagate through organizations, why bureaucracy expands to compensate for thinning skill, why public trust erodes, and why reform efforts fail. You see not chaos, but structure. Not randomness, but pattern. This book is not a chronology of empires, nor a catalogue of disasters, nor a philosophical meditation on decline. It is an attempt to isolate the root mechanism that governs them all. Civilizations are, at their core, systems built and maintained by human capability. When capability is high, societies can build complex, reliable, efficient structures. They can innovate. They can expand. They can absorb shocks. When capability declines, complexity becomes brittle. Systems wear faster than they can be repaired. Administrative layers multiply to hide internal weakness. Organizations substitute process for competence. Standards quietly lower. And decline accelerates. This model does not require speculation or ideology to function. It does not rely on cultural pessimism, political bias, or moralizing narratives. It is a structural theory, mechanical, explanatory, predictive. A civilization is simply the sum of its systems. If the capability required to operate those systems is no longer present in the population, the systems degrade. If this gap continues growing, collapse becomes inevitable. Not because the people are bad, or because society has sinned, but because the numbers no longer align. Modern readers often sense that something is deeply wrong but struggle to articulate the cause. This book aims to provide that articulation. It argues that many of the frustrations people experience, poor customer service, failing public infrastructure, contradictory bureaucratic rules, technical incompetence, supply chain failures, incoherent political decisions, declining educational outcomes, and the general sense that things don't work like they used to, are symptoms of a widening capability, complexity gap. The book approaches this gap across different scales. It begins with the individual experience, the technician who cannot diagnose a basic fault, the manager who cannot lead, the bureaucrat who does not understand the forms they administer. It then moves outward to organizational failure, the corporation with inconsistent outputs, the government department drowning in its own processes, the infrastructure grid patched together with stopgap fixes. It then widens further to the level of nation-states and empires, showing how demographic decline, institutional hollowing, and systemic standard lowering compound into large-scale structural failure. One of the central purposes of this framework is to remove moral judgment from decline and replace it with structural clarity. Decline is not primarily a story of laziness, corruption, greed, or decadence, although these can appear as secondary effects. It is a story of misalignment between what a system requires and what a population can provide. This misalignment is not sudden. It builds slowly and invisibly over generations. Complexity grows automatically. Capability must be maintained deliberately. When a civilization forgets this, decline becomes the default trajectory. This book also explores how this misalignment emerges. Demographic collapse reduces the number of high-skill individuals entering the workforce. Immigration shifts from selective to mass volume, reducing average capability density. Education systems lower standards to compensate for skill gaps. Bureaucracies expand to maintain the appearance of function. Organizations prioritize compliance over competence. Incentives shift from performance to protection. Each of these changes appears small when viewed in isolation. Together, they create a structural downward spiral that is difficult to reverse. The chapters that follow illustrate this mechanism through historical examples, modern parallels, and systemic analysis. They show how empires across history rose by building complexity matched by capability, and collapsed when the capability required to sustain their complexity eroded. They show that collapse is neither mysterious nor sudden, but the predictable outcome of capability decay. They show how institutional fragility emerges not from isolated failures, but from a widening gap between what systems demand and what their operators can deliver. Above all, this book is designed to give the reader a new way to interpret the world, a model that makes sense of decline without resorting to fatalism or political tribalism. When you understand the capability, complexity cycle, you stop seeing decline as a moral failure and begin seeing it as a mechanical one. You stop blaming individuals and begin noticing the structure. You stop assuming chaos and begin recognizing pattern. You stop asking, "Why is everything breaking?" and begin asking, "What is the capability requirement of this system, and do we still meet it?" This book does not promise easy solutions, structural problems rarely have them. But it does promise clarity. And clarity is the first step toward corrective action, whether at the level of an individual, an organization, or a civilization. If you have ever felt that the world around you is becoming harder to navigate, more error-prone, more incoherent, or less competently managed, the chapters ahead will show you why. They will show you that your frustration has a structure. They will show you that you are not imagining the decline, you are observing a civilization experiencing the consequences of capability falling beneath complexity. You are living inside a pattern as old as history. This book will show you the mechanism that drives it.